When we talk about a high-value woman, we're not referring to someone who puts herself on a pedestal or sees herself as superior to others. We're talking about a woman who recognizes her own intrinsic worth, who honors herself, and who establishes healthy relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocity. Napoleon Hill, in his teachings on the power of the mind and personal development, always emphasized that our external reality is a direct reflection of our internal reality. For a woman who cultivates her high value, this means understanding that the way she relates to herself fundamentally determines how others will treat her. The first key thing a high-value woman would never do is make herself smaller to make a man feel bigger. How many times have we seen talented, intelligent, and capable women hiding behind false modesty or pretending to be less than they are so as not to intimidate a partner? This is an emotional trap that reveals deep wounds related to our own perception of worth. When a woman diminishes herself, she isn't being kind or considerate. She is, unconsciously, betraying herself. She is denying her gifts, her abilities, and her unique essence. Napoleon Hill taught us that our dominant thoughts shape our reality, and when a woman constantly puts herself in the background, she is programming her subconscious mind to accept less than she deserves. True self-love isn't narcissism or arrogance. It's the healthy recognition that we are unique beings, with talents and qualities that deserve to be celebrated and shared with the world. A woman who genuinely loves herself understands that shining brightly doesn't diminish anyone else's light around her. On the contrary, she inspires others to shine brightly too. This pattern of making oneself smaller often has roots in childhood, in messages received about how a good girl should behave. Many of us grew up hearing that we should be modest, not draw attention to ourselves, and always put the needs of others before our own. Although these things may have been taught with good intentions, they created generations of women who learned to hide. Emotional healing begins when we recognize these patterns and make the conscious choice to honor ourselves. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or insensitive to others, but rather finding the healthy balance between giving and receiving, between supporting others and supporting ourselves. A high-value woman understands that a truly confident man doesn't feel threatened by her greatness. He celebrates it. If a man needs her to be smaller for him to feel good about himself, it reveals his own insecurities and limitations, not something she needs to accommodate or fix. When we choose to honor ourselves completely, we create an energetic field around us that attracts people who also honor us. It's a universal law: what we are on the inside manifests on the outside. If we devalue ourselves internally, we will attract people who also don't value us. But when we recognize and cultivate our internal worth, we magnetize relationships that reflect that same quality. The second fundamental key thing a high-value woman would never do is chase a man who shows disinterest or inconsistency. This behavior, although extremely common, reveals deep patterns of emotional neediness and a disconnection from one's own internal value. Napoleon Hill constantly spoke about the importance of keeping our energy focused on what we want to attract, not on what is rejecting us. When a woman chases someone who isn't reciprocating her interest, she is energetically placing herself in a position of scarcity and desperation. This tendency to chase what eludes us has deep psychological roots. Often, it's connected to childhood wounds of abandonment, where we learned that love means struggle, constant effort, and the need to prove our worth. Unconsciously, we interpret rejection or indifference as a challenge to be overcome, when in fact, it should be seen as valuable information about incompatibility. A woman who truly loves herself understands that genuine love flows naturally. It doesn't need to be forced, won through emotional manipulation, or maintained through constant sacrifices of her own well-being. True love is a mutual choice. It's reciprocity. It's a meeting of two people who recognize and value each other. When we chase those who don't want us, we are sending a clear message to the universe and our subconscious. I don't deserve to be chosen spontaneously. I need to strive to be loved. This limiting belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, attracting relationships where we will always be the one giving more, trying harder, and adapting more. Personal growth in this area involves developing what we can call the muscle of receptivity. This means learning to recognize and receive the love that comes to us easily, instead of obsessively focusing on what is denied to us. It is a complete re-education of our attraction patterns. A high-value woman understands that her energy is precious and sacred. She doesn't waste it trying to convince someone of her worth. She simply radiates it and allows the right people to be naturally drawn to that light. When someone doesn't recognize her value, she doesn't see it as a personal failure, but as a natural incompatibility. This change in perspective is revolutionary. Instead of thinking, "Why doesn't he want me?" a woman aware of her value thinks, "Is he right for me?" This reversal of the question completely changes the dynamic of the relationship and attracts partners who are also at a high level of consciousness. Emotional healing in this aspect involves working on the wounds of rejection, developing solid self-esteem that doesn't depend on external validation, and learning to trust the natural flow of life. When we stop swimming against the current and start to flow with it, we discover that true love comes to us effortlessly. The third key thing a high-value woman would never do is accept emotional breadcrumbs and treat them as if they were a feast. This is, perhaps, one of the most painful and destructive patterns a woman can develop in her relationships: the ability to settle for the bare minimum and still feel grateful for it. Napoleon Hill always emphasized that we receive from life exactly what we believe we deserve. When a woman accepts sporadic messages, last-minute plans, unfulfilled promises, and fragmented attention as if they were precious gifts, she is programming her subconscious to accept low-quality relationships. This pattern usually develops in women who grew up in environments where love was conditional or scarce. Perhaps they had emotionally unavailable parents, or they lived through experiences where they had to fight for attention and affection. Unconsciously, they learned that any show of interest, no matter how small, should be valued and protected. But here is the transformative truth. When we settle for breadcrumbs, we are telling the universe that we don't believe we deserve the full feast. We are sending out an energetic frequency that attracts people who also don't see us as deserving of full and present love. A woman who has cultivated her internal high value understands that consistency is the language of true love. She isn't impressed by grand, sporadic gestures that are followed by days or weeks of silence. She values constant presence, regular communication, and a genuine interest in building something meaningful together. Emotional healing in this area involves recognizing and honoring our legitimate emotional needs. It's not being demanding or dramatic to want consistency, respect, and presence in a relationship. These are basic human needs. When we start treating ourselves with the love and consideration we deserve, we automatically raise our standards for others. It's important to understand that accepting breadcrumbs doesn't make us easier to deal with or less demanding. In fact, it creates more complicated and toxic relationships. When we don't communicate our needs clearly and settle for less than we deserve, we create dynamics of resentment, neediness, and emotional manipulation. A high-value woman has courageous conversations about her needs. She doesn't expect the other person to guess what she needs, but she also doesn't accept being treated as one option among many. She understands that a man who truly values her will make a point to show it through consistent actions, not just pretty words or occasional gestures. True self-love teaches us that we deserve relationships where we don't have to beg for attention, where we don't live in anxiety about when we'll receive the next sign of interest. We deserve relationships where we are a priority, not a convenience, where we are chosen consciously, not for lack of a better option. This internal transformation creates a powerful magnetic field. When a woman truly believes in her worth and acts from that belief, she attracts men who also recognize and honor that value. It's a change in frequency that completely alters the type of person who comes to us. The fourth key thing a high-value woman would never do is take on the responsibility of fixing or saving a man. This is a pattern deeply ingrained in many women, fueled by social conditioning that teaches us we are natural healers, nurturers, and responsible for the emotional well-being of others. Napoleon Hill taught us that each person is responsible for their own transformation and growth. When a woman takes on the role of a man's emotional savior, she not only burdens herself with a responsibility that isn't hers, but she also deprives the man of the opportunity to grow and develop on his own. This pattern often originates from dysfunctional family dynamics, where a woman learned from a young age that her value was tied to her ability to care for others and solve their problems. Perhaps she grew up taking care of an alcoholic father, a depressed mother, or taking on responsibilities that were not appropriate for her age. What happens when a woman enters this savior dynamic is that she becomes codependent, losing her own identity in the process of trying to fix the other person. She begins to measure her own worth by the partner's progress or lack thereof, creating a toxic dynamic where her self-esteem is held hostage by someone else's choices. A high-value woman understands that each person has their own journey of growth and healing. She can offer support, encouragement, and love, but she never takes responsibility for a man's problems, addictions, traumas, or emotional immaturity. She recognizes that trying to save someone who isn't ready to save themselves is a losing battle that will only drain her vital energy. True compassion in this context is not taking on another's pain as your own, but rather setting healthy boundaries that allow each person to be responsible for their own healing. When a woman constantly saves a man from the consequences of his choices, she is actually preventing him from learning and maturing. This paradigm shift requires deep self-awareness work. Many women discover that their need to save others is closely connected to their own difficulty in looking at their own wounds and working on their own healing. It's easier to focus on someone else's problems than to face our own internal challenges. Personal growth in this aspect involves developing what we can call detached love. This means genuinely loving someone, but without losing yourself in the process. It means wishing the other person well, but recognizing that each person has their own timing and their own way of learning life's lessons. A woman who is conscious of her value attracts men who are already on a path of personal growth, who take responsibility for their lives and who are not looking for a substitute mother, but a partner to share the journey with. She understands that a healthy relationship is made up of two whole people who complement each other, not one whole person trying to complete a fragmented one. When we stop trying to save others and start focusing on our own evolution, we create space for relationships based on conscious choice, not on need or codependency. This is the foundation of a truly mature and transformative love. The fifth key thing a high-value woman would never do is ignore or downplay her own feelings and intuition to maintain superficial peace in a relationship. This is one of the most subtle and devastating patterns, as it is often disguised as a virtue, being an understanding and flexible woman. Napoleon Hill always emphasized the importance of trusting our inner wisdom and honoring our personal truth. When a woman constantly ignores her feelings, her perceptions, and her intuition to avoid conflict or to not bother her partner, she is betraying herself in the deepest way possible. Our intuition is like a highly sophisticated internal guidance system. It processes information in ways our rational mind can't always immediately comprehend, but which are extremely accurate. When a woman learns to distrust this inner wisdom, she disconnects from one of her greatest strengths and becomes vulnerable to situations and people that are not beneficial for her. This pattern of self-silencing often has roots in experiences where a woman learned that expressing her feelings or opinions resulted in rejection, anger, or abandonment. Perhaps she grew up in an environment where her emotions were invalidated, where she was called too sensitive or dramatic whenever she tried to communicate her needs. The result is a woman who becomes an expert at reading others' moods and adapting to maintain external harmony, but who completely loses touch with her own internal emotional landscape. She may even reach a point where she no longer knows what she truly feels or thinks about a situation, as the process of silencing herself has become so automatic. A high-value woman understands that healthy conflicts are a natural part of any intimate relationship. She is not afraid to express her feelings, even when it might cause temporary discomfort. She understands that true peace is never built on silencing one of the parties, but on honest and respectful dialogue. Emotional healing in this aspect involves reconnecting with one's own inner world, learning to name and validate one's own feelings, and developing the courage to express them clearly and lovingly. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or confrontational, but rather developing assertive communication skills that honor both her needs and those of her partner. It's important to understand that when a woman expresses herself authentically, she gives the relationship an opportunity to deepen and become more real. Relationships based on the suppression of one person's feelings are built on fragile foundations that eventually crumble. A woman who is conscious of her value attracts men who also value authenticity and who are not threatened by a partner who has her own opinions and expresses her feelings. These men understand that a woman who honors and expresses herself is far more interesting and attractive than one who diminishes herself to please. True self-love teaches us that our feelings are valid and important, even when others don't understand or agree with them. When we learn to honor our inner truth, we create relationships based on mutual authenticity, where both people can be completely themselves. The sixth and final key thing a high-value woman would never do is stay in relationships where she is disrespected, devalued, or treated as a second option. This is perhaps the clearest demonstration of self-love and recognition of one's own worth, the courage to walk away when a relationship doesn't honor who you truly are. Napoleon Hill taught us that our lives are shaped by the decisions we make, especially the decisions about what we accept and what we do not accept. When a woman stays in situations where she is consistently mistreated, she is making a powerful statement to the universe about what she believes she deserves. This difficulty in walking away from toxic relationships has deep and complex layers. It is often rooted in a fear of abandonment, low self-esteem, or limiting beliefs about love that were formed in childhood. Some women learn that loving means suffering, that relationships are naturally difficult, or that they must fight to deserve love. Other times, this pattern is maintained by what we might call an addiction to potential, the tendency to fall in love not with the person in front of us, but with an idealized version of what that person could become. This fixation on potential keeps us trapped in situations that drain our vital energy while we wait for a transformation that may never happen. A high-value woman understands that she is not a charity project for anyone. She is not in the world to be someone's therapist, nor to prove her worth through her tolerance of disrespect. She understands that a man who values her will demonstrate it consistently through actions, words, and attitudes that honor her. The emotional healing process that leads to this transformation involves developing what we can call unconditional self-love. This means loving yourself whether you are in a relationship or not, recognizing that your happiness and completeness do not depend on another person, and having the courage to choose healthy solitude over toxic company. This paradigm shift is revolutionary because it completely transforms the energy a woman gives off. When she truly believes she deserves to be treated with respect, love, and consideration, she automatically attracts people who are aligned with that belief. It is impossible for a person who deeply loves herself to remain for long in situations that contradict that love. Personal growth in this area requires developing what Napoleon Hill would call unwavering faith. Not necessarily religious faith, but faith in your own value. Faith that you deserve healthy relationships, and faith that the universe conspires in your favor when you honor yourself completely. A woman conscious of her value understands that walking away from a relationship that doesn't serve her is not giving up. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that she is too precious to be wasted in dynamics that do not nourish her soul. She understands that every no she says to what doesn't serve her is a yes to something better that is yet to come. When a woman finally incorporates all of these keys into her life, she becomes magnetic in a completely new way. Not because she is trying to attract someone, but because she is radiating authenticity, self-love, and integrity. She becomes the type of woman who attracts high-value men, who also honor themselves and are ready for a true partnership based on mutual respect, joint growth, and genuine love. The journey to becoming a high-value woman is essentially a journey back to herself, to her authentic essence, her true values, and the recognition that she is complete and valuable exactly as she is. When this inner transformation happens, her entire external reality reorganizes to reflect this new internal truth.